Hello, happy Monday, everybody, and welcome back to Best of Behance, the show where we interview some of the best and brightest on Behance. My name is Ryan Selvey. I'm your host, and today I have the great privilege of welcoming Steve Simpson over to our show. He is a wildly successful artist, illustrator, designer, everything in between. You might have seen his work while you're going around the site. He's from Dublin, Ireland. And it is my pleasure to introduce him. Please welcome Steve. Hey, good morning, Steve.
Hey Ryan,
How
thanks
you
very much
doing?
for having me. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing great. Good morning, or good afternoon to you. I know we kind of do that every time. Every
Yeah,
time. Obviously, your plant game is much better than mine, but I have three.
that's
Uh,
impressive. Yeah,
yeah, but nothing compared to yours.
yeah.
Nothing.
Well, I'm competitive. You see.
Yeah, right. Competitive, plant competitive. I do want to say hello to a bunch of people in the chat. We have Kirsty, Jennifer, Andreas, Viola, Sean, Annika, Sam, Kirsty, Stuart, Maria, Francisco, Kirsty, Lindsay. There's so many people. I don't know if I can go through everybody, but it's really exciting to see a bunch of people. This is our first time actually on Adobe Live rather than just hosting directly from the guest channel, but the replay will also be available on Steve's profile shortly after the broadcast later today. We're going to get something to have it worked out. So if you want to watch that, you can't catch the whole thing. That's where you can watch it. But yeah, no, it's very, very fast chat game today. So I don't know if I'll entirely be able to keep up with it, but we have a bunch of moderators. So forgive me if I don't call out as I normally do. But I do want to pull up some of your work, and we can kind of talk through a bunch of different questions. We also have a few questions for people on Instagram as well. So everyone wants to have a piece of you, but I get to start. So do you want to start off by just kind of explaining yourself as an artist? We could actually do the elevator pitch first if you'd like. Would that
Yeah,
work?
give it a go.
All
How long
right,
do I
cool.
have?
So wait, let me get rid of me sharing my screen real quick. And then I'll pop up the intro and then I'll give you a countdown. Boom, we'll do about 30 seconds, but let me first just cue it up. So elevator pitches are very important. They're obviously a way that when you're especially starting out as an artist, getting people to know kind of a little bit about you and just a general, Sparks Notes version of what you do. But obviously, as a well-trained artist yourself, you probably already have a wide range of experience and you can explain yourself, hopefully, in a few than 30 seconds. So I'm going to start the countdown and I'll send it over your way. But just anything that describes you, there's no wrong answer. But yeah. All right. So ready in three, two, one.
Okay. Steve Simpson. I'm based in Dublin, originally from Manchester. I studied technical illustration at college, but dropped out and worked in animation for 5 or 6 years. Prior to college, I have an uncle who worked in comics, so from a very early age, I knew that's what I wanted to do. So I moved to Ireland in 1990. I worked on Ninja Turtles, amongst some other things. In 95, I started working in illustration. I think my style, it was very much at the start of the digital period, and it was a mix of really taking what I've been doing in animation and comics and really just doing it in a digital way. My style has evolved over the years, and I think somewhere between sort of comics, animation, and it's also very technical. So things are wonkily correct. I love color, tones, and I don't use real blacks. I don't use real whites. They're all a mixture somewhere in between the colors that are in the palette. I work for toy companies, record companies, book covers, editorial. Occasionally dip my feet back into animation, posters. I create art. I make screen prints. I have a shop, and I'm also launching my first NFT next week.
That was great. Also, I mean, I also loved how much you covered with all the different mediums that you do. Do you happen to have a favorite medium that you kind of have landed on between somewhere of like book covers or posters or anything in
Uh,
between?
yeah, I think toys actually. I really
Yeah.
found a home in toys. Yeah, I'm working on some cars at the moment, which I think of all the things I've done, it's so there is the sort of design side of things. There's the illustration creativity on that side of rough things, but then there's also this technical side where you've got to be able to draw it accurately on things like the one you're showing there, where you've got a turnaround of a character, being able to work out how it looks from the side and the back, and then working with a 3D guy, somebody who would render it up. So yeah, that's really fun because I think the best part of it is that as illustrators we're used to handling our work, whether it's appearing in a newspaper or on a piece of packaging, but it's always 2D. But with this, it's a 3D object. It's like a small piece of sculpture, and with toys you can play with them as well. So it's even better.
Yeah, no, it's nice to be able to just actually take your creation and be able to have it manifested in your hands. It has to be
It's
really
weird.
cool.
Yeah, it's very strange feeling. But it's I think it's that, and I think we've all got a big kid in us, and if we're allowed not to grow up, then we can really appreciate toys. But being able to, having young kids at one point when I was originally making some of the toys and seeing them play with it was, yeah, it's really good fun.
You have a lot of different parts of the process actually in this product, which is really interesting to see. I see that you have obviously the parts where you sketched it out, and then you also have parts where you have to call out Pantone. You also have this part where you are
Yeah, that's
painting.
a weird part, yeah, because it was like, you know what you because some of these toys are based on a pre-made model. So these ones, you've got you know 3 different bodies and 4 different heads, and so you have to choose which ones you're going to do. And with those ones, the toy company sent me over the actual white toy itself, and I had to sort of visualize it I used acrylics there just to see how it looked before we progressed. But the ones that are really exciting are the ones where you're making the mold as well. So um, some of them, they're completely fresh. Like this one here, you're looking at now, him. So so he's completely fresh. So everything about him. I mean, obviously the hands have to have the same grip as the rest of it, but yeah, that's exciting to do that.
Yeah, it's really cool also to just see the different dynamic elements that you can have once you're outside of that template. Obviously, with uh, toy creation, like the Vinylmation guys, where it's like always the same thing. It's always cool to see artists really adapt to that space, but it's also really cool to see artists have the freedom to just make something entirely new and produce something in their image. So it's really cool to kind of see you successfully do both of those.
Yeah, you get to have a lot of fun as well. So with a lot of these, the brief is quite wide open. So obviously you've got an age group that you want to hit. There's and you've got the things that they like, and they've got to be colourful, and so that there are. But there's still places to have fun. The one I really liked there was the cupcakes for pirates. So if the brief is 6 cupcakes or 5 cupcakes, then you can do really whatever you want. So it's like a shark donut.
Yeah, I want to eat the shark. The
Yeah,
shark donut, I think, is my favorite.
yeah, and yeah, so you can play around, and I think that's the best part of being a creative. Just
Absolutely.
having silly ideas.
It just the breadth of work that you have different experiments with is it's just really fun to see. And like you were saying, you're so much more than only toy design. You have so many different activations between packaging design and posters. What would you say is your favorite?
I really like. There's a project I did a few years ago for Mini. I think it's a bit further down. Yeah, which was, people talk about, how do you get your work, and I've always found it just comes to you in very strange ways. And this was, I was at an event, and it was a very strange event where I'd set up a studio inside this warehouse, pretending to work for the launch of this new range of minis. It was a really weird scenario, but during that event, this German guy came over, and he was on his own as well. And we spent most of the evening sort of drinking beer because it was an evening shot, and he was talking to me. And he just said, I've got this really crazy idea to drive a Mini from Frankfurt, to the west of Ireland. And I'm thinking about, would you be able to draw on something like that? And, and we ended up together, we wrote the brief for his bosses. So it was one of the strangest sort of ways of getting a job, is that we generated the idea between ourselves. And then we went on this, Munich. So we flew over to Munich, and they had this old Mini, which is, I think, from 1990. It was one of the last ones they made. And I got them to cover it in a matte vinyl so I could draw on it. And we traveled from Munich, stopping at all these clubs, these Mini enthusiasts have, right across Germany, across Belgium, across the UK. We stopped places like Brands Hatch and London, and the original factory where the Mini was made, up through Liverpool. And then we got the ferry, that's Penny Lane, got the ferry over to Ireland, and traveled through Dublin to the west of Ireland, where it was the Marquee. And I think I had 2 days to finish it. But it was crazy. Yeah, fantastic photographer, Amy Shore, there along the way, documenting the whole thing.
I know you said that you had it covered in like a matte finish of sorts so that you could create on top of it. I really like this picture, by the way, of you kind of underneath the door. But did you mostly just use paint markers or Sharpie, or how did you kind of bring that on?
I played around, I had to experiment a bit on what to use. I really want to use Poscas because the black on them is really good, but they'll wash off. They wouldn't stay on it.
Did you put like a finish on top of it afterwards?
Yeah, but the problem was that we were driving this, so I was drawing. I was drawing with Sharpies, and we had to wash it. You wouldn't believe the carnage that was stuck to the front of it, the number of flies.
Gross.
So we had flies from right across the continent, and so that it's the Sharpie stayed best. So we were able to wash it down, and then when it was finished, it was shipped back to Germany, and they lacquered it and coated it with a clear varnish. And it's been in various museums across Germany for the past few years. It's incredible just to go over and see it, and with all the photographs and everything that went with it.
Nuno says that this is actually his favorite project for you, and he actually said it right actually before you even mentioned it. He said that he knew it was yours, but he says that Steve is a beast, never disappoints. Another thing that I love in his work is how he does the barcodes in some of the packaging products, always original and creative. So
yeah. There was no barcode for this, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, right? Where's the barcode on the Mini?
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite part of the car that ended up being part of the final design?
I think the bonnet came together nicely because with the bonnet, I started looking at it on the right side. So that's Munich, and the left side of it is Westport. So, so each panel had to be carefully planned out before we did the trip. And so eventually there's a road that follows all the way through the different places we visited, and then ends up back on the front bonnet again. So
that's really fun.
Yeah, it was crazy. There wasn't enough time, and there was a crew of 5 of us. We had 2 minis. We had this Mini, and we had one of the new minis, and we were driving along. And so the German crew drove it across Europe. and then me and Amy drove it across UK because we were driving on the other side of the road. But I haven't driven a Mini since the 90s.
Right.
Yeah, and it's amazing how small they are now, or how big everything else on the road has become.
Yeah, it's all perspective at that point. Yeah. I do want to kind of talk about this barcode thing. I want to find an example of it.
There it is.
You have these illustrated barcodes. How did this kind of come to be? Is this something you came up on your own, or something you ran into, you saw somewhere else?
Yeah, I think one of my first projects on Behance was the Inferno hot sauces for mixed chili. And that was kind of a breakthrough project for me. And the reason I say that is I was working as an illustrator, but also a graphic designer. And I always had problems trying to figure out how to get my illustration, which was quirky, work with traditional sort of graphic design as we know it these days, which is all very clean. And I started the project thinking about it as being just an illustration that wrapped around the bottle, as opposed to having a mental block about it being graphic design. And then the only thing that stood out on the bottle that looked like it was a piece of graphic design was the barcode. And it was like, well, how can I change the barcode to make it look like it's been done by me? And that's when I started playing around and just trying to, I think, illustration these days, it's all about research, and, it's crazy and the things you have to look up. But I found a lot of information about how barcodes work. And like, for instance, did you know it's actually the white lines that the barcode reader is reading, not the black lines?
No way. So it's the negative space.
Yes, the reflection of the white into the barcode reader, as opposed to the black lines. And because they're infrared, it won't pick up anything red. So you can't use red for the actual bars themselves because it won't see it. So I ended up with all this knowledge about how to, just to point out that there is a little bit there that explains how it works if anybody's interested, the things to do and the things not to do. But it was, for me, it was just one of those things. And after I did that, all my packaging projects after that, people were asking for, can you add a barcode, an illustrated barcode? So
became your trademark.
Yeah, and I mean, they're really simple to do. They don't take much time, and usually they're based on something that's happening on the rest of the cover. So they're fairly easy to pick, to mix in. And so that was the original one. If you go up just a tiny bit there, no, sorry, the other way, a little bit further.
Up or down? This one?
Down. The one in the middle with the, go down a tiny bit. Yeah, so that background. Yeah, so that's the original one. That was the first one I did.
Which actually brings us to a good spot of we can actually check out your first upload if you want to. You want to do that?
Going back in time.
Yeah, let's go back in time. Right, so it is your Inferno sauce packaging, and it is uploaded over 10 years ago, right? So September 22nd, 2010. Obviously, we've come quite a way since.
Sorry, Ryan, you haven't appreciated that, did you?
I haven't appreciated it, but I will appreciate it live on stream right now. You want to talk a little bit about this piece, and we can actually kind of also break down how you've grown as an artist since then?
Yeah, I think there are projects that have disappeared from my Behance page over the years, because they were either no longer relevant or do the type of work I didn't want any more of, or maybe they just look really dated. But this one's always stuck around, and I think the reason I still like it is the fact it has that sort of vintage feel to it. And these are still sold in the shops over here. The range is much bigger nowadays, so we keep expanding it by maybe a bottle every couple of years. And it was the first time I'd won an award for packaging design, which was something I'd never thought about before. I'd never really considered myself a graphic designer as such, mostly an illustrator. And then to start picking up gold awards for packaging design, it gave me the confidence to carry on with the packaging side of things. So, but yeah, it is one of my favorite projects because it feels like the breakthrough project. It was the one where I was able to combine design and illustration into something that still felt like me. And yeah, it's quirky and it's got a kind of vintage feel to it. And I think that particular project was very much hand drawn. So it was, pencil drawings that were scanned into Photoshop, up in the contrast, and then it felt more like an old sort of print as opposed to anything. So.
Well, I think my favorite part about this project, and actually all of your projects really, is the small industry standards that you kind of go and you flip on their head. So I know we already talked about the barcodes, but even these stickers, kind of how you have them and they overflow from the cap onto the bottle is really cool. Is that just something where you were experimenting and it's just something that came to be, or did you get inspired?
Yeah, well, I guess there needs to be a solution for it, but you try to. I think what I try to do with everything I do is take the most obvious idea, and if I go back years to the start of my career, and you look at other people's work and you think, my God, that's really creative. How did they come up with that idea? And then you sit around, you've got a project, you've got a brief, and you go, well, how can I be really crazy with this? How can I make this really original? And it's really stifling. You don't get anywhere. And over the years, I discovered that the thing that works best for me is to take the most obvious idea. Whatever that is, it's the most obvious idea, but then turn that idea around slightly and try to do something else. And I'll give you an example. I'm working on some cars at the moment, some toy cars, and there's little characters in the cars. And the one I was working on the other day was a truck. It's a pickup truck. So the truck is designed in such a way that it's got spanners and things built into it. So it's not just a truck, but it's how it's used and what it's used for is represented within the truck itself. And and I really like that, because that's, for me, it's a really nice graphic, and when it's actually made into 3D, I'm really, really hopeful it'll look great. And then I was trying to design the character, and the character has to somehow relate to the truck, and the client said, well, you've got a mustache. The character itself has a hat that is a nut and bolt type thing. So he's already relating to the truck. And she said, well, maybe the mustache that you have on the character, could you put the mustache on the truck as well? And I'm going, well, I could, but I really like the front of the truck because that's a nut and bolt with lights made out of nuts and bolts that are attached to spanners. And I thought, it's just going to ruin everything. But what if I take the spanner off the car and make that the mustache on the character? So it's sometimes you just take a deep breath and you just switch things around, and then what you come up with is something that it's silly, but it looks good. It's kind of there's like really obvious ideas that you just need to give yourself just a few seconds just to try and spin things and turn things around. So I think that's the way my brain works nowadays, but I think maybe it was trained to do that just from all the work I've done over the last few years.
Absolutely. And also just limitations and different confinements often kind of bring you there.
Yeah. I think having limitations in what you do really helps narrow down the possibilities. And so if you've only got a limited number of choices, then how can you twist those around?
Now, I know for this project in particular, you said that you scanned things in and then edited it into Photoshop. This is obviously 11 years ago. How has your process kind of changed? How has it stayed the same since you've made this project?
Yeah, well, it's changed a huge amount, actually. I think it's looking at the change from even further back, because the rate of change since I started working full-time as an illustrator probably about 95, And my first studio was huge, and I had 3 working desks in it. So at a desk, I would work as my cartoonist. I have a desk with a really old Mac on it, and I'd have a desk where I was painting, and there was probably another desk that I used to cut things out. So, and if you compare that today, you know, I've got this really bad habit of sitting on the sofa with an iPad on my knee. You know, the only mess I make is Post-its. I have to pick them up every now and again.
Now you're predominantly an iPad now, you feel like?
Yeah, I think what the iPad has done is, you know, it's brought it all back to, because I was a huge sketchbook guy, you know. I guess as well during lockdown, none of us are getting on the train and none of us are getting, you know, traveling that much. But I started working from home about 3 years ago and gave up my studio. It was just, I just didn't need as much space.
So you were prepped for COVID. You were just ready for it.
I was already in COVID, yeah.
Yeah.
well on my way for that. And so, yeah, unfortunately, I don't work in my sketchbook as much as I used to, because I've just found that actually working directly onto the iPad with a pencil is just so fast. You know, it's like you don't have to scan anything in anymore, and it's there. And I'm sketching in color more now. You know, so it's just like my rough ideas are already in color, and it's almost cutting out a stage. So, yeah, I don't need a scanner anymore. You know, still I have a printer which I use for invoices. So.
Yeah, I mean, that's the most important right there for you. It's your favorite part.
But I still have, I still use my laptop. I have an iMac there that I haven't switched on 12 months now.
Oh man, wow. Yeah, you're full on.
Yeah, so I still have to go into, you know, Photoshop and on the laptop and, you know, Illustrator, and I think one of the things that the iPad doesn't do very well is just give you that sense of scale, you know, and
got to get a bigger iPad, I guess.
Yeah, but it's something more about, yeah, it's the technicalities of having a laptop. You can, you know, checking sizes, you know, it's much easier just to get a grasp of how, making sure that, you know, well, one, it's in the correct color mode, and, you know, the sizes are right, and I just feel more comfortable doing that final check.
All the technicalities.
Yeah. But then the sort of creative part of it really comes down to the iPad. And it's just, yeah, it's amazing. Amazing technology. Yeah.
Crazy what a decade will do.
Isn't it?
But that puts us actually around the middle of the hour. So we're just got a very short break. And you can grab some water real quick if you want. But when we come back, we can talk about your most appreciated product. So, all right, we'll be right back.
Hello. Welcome back.
Hello. Good morning.
See, there we go.
I'm streaming and having a good time, so feel free to pop in and ask questions at any time.
We are glad to have you.
All right, so welcome back, everyone. If you're just joining us in the middle of the hour, my name is Ryan Selvey. I'm your host for Best of Behance. Right now, we have Steve Simpson. We are currently going through his portfolio and talking about his work process. We're right about to hop right into his most appreciated product ever. So welcome back, and we can hop right into that. So let me cue it up for you. So your most appreciated project actually is this gastro bar menu cover, which looks very complex and very busy, which I love about so much of your work. And I also want to hear a little bit about how you manage to like organize and keep the eye focused over everything. But before we even hop into that, I wanted to see kind of your thoughts on this project, if you were expecting it to be your top project, and how you feel about it in general.
Yeah. So what year is that, by the way?
So this one is actually from, let's see here, 2012. So October 29th, 2012.
Yeah. So it's not.
It's had time to simmer.
It certainly has. Yeah. Yeah. That is for a celebrity chef in Ireland, yeah, it was. Yeah, there's some bitter taste with that we won't talk about. But
oh yeah, okay, all right. Go figure. It's the biggest one then.
Yeah, but I think when I met him, his brief was the only thing he could say to me was I wanted to look like where's Wally. So you say Waldo, don't you?
Oh
Where's
yeah, well you
Waldo?
guys call it Wally.
Yeah, we say Wally over here.
That's kind of cute.
Yeah.
I like that. I like that more than Waldo.
Yeah.
Wally's more fun. But I digress.
And he said, "What I do is get you photographs of the guys working in the kitchen, and so you can put all the guys in there." And this was just opening up, and I sort of said to him, I said, "Well, what happens when someone leaves or someone new joins?" And so I said, "Well, maybe the idea is that you send me your menu and tell me what's on the menu, and then I feature, the the pork, the beef, the chicken, as the characters that are working the kitchen." And so that's how that transpired. It was and I work on lots of different types of projects, and some of those projects have to have like an instant message. And I remember years ago working with an agency and the creative director said, "Well, the thing you have to remember is that if you're working on a 48 sheet that's on the side of the freeway, you've got to get your message across in about 3 seconds." I said, "But if you're working on a bus shelter, then people are standing there, and you've got plenty of time while they're waiting for the bus to look at what you're doing." So, that's your first. That's the first thing I always think about with a new project. And I think, well, a menu of all things is something that sits on the table, and people they will look at the outside of it, and but they will also look at the inside as well. So looking at the outside, you've got lots of time for people to study it and figure out what's going on, and it's kind of be it could be a point of conversation as well.
Yeah, nice conversation filler.
Yeah, there's lots of stories in there. When I'm working, I'm trying to think about what the characters and what the characters do and why the characters are in that particular scene. But there was also lots of words in there, and so the main part of it is the gastro bar. That's the name of that particular area of the restaurant. And Fade Street Social is the name of the overall restaurant. One of the great things on that one was that the Fade Street logo isn't quite like that. So they allowed me to make it more wonky.
Mm-hmm.
So it's, so then it fits in with the rest of the lettering that's on mine. It's not completely as wonky, but it still looks from a distance as being the same.
It feels cohesive.
Yeah. So, but I'm able to play around with it just enough as if it's been through a filter that makes it look more like my work. But yeah, this one, I think more than most of my work is, it's an exploration. You can stare at it and see the stories and things going on there. So it's more, I'd see it more as a pattern than, like a focal message.
Right. I do think that it's messed up that you named the cow Angus, just because I feel like that's foreshadowing some very awful things.
Yeah.
It's gonna be fired a little soon and served up.
Yeah, well, the Angus breed of cows is like, again, it's really important that you actually do research, because originally he was a black and white cow, and it was only by chance I thought I better check. And no, Angus cows aren't black and white. So.
They're not black and white. They're not traditionally the the picturesque one. But I think it fits well. Also, it really even fills in with your color palette. How do you come up with your color palettes?
I guess they're an evolution of, going back to that mixed chili one, I suppose, and the reds and the blues. I mean, my colors have probably changed a bit since then. They're a bit brighter. I think that's just fashion is what people expect these days. It doesn't. I think with fashion for me, it's about colors and how can I change those to keep them current. But I use a very limited palette, but that's so limited. So for me, it's like it's a tone that I have as a palette. So it's the black's not really black and the white's not really white. And the black can be a very dark purple but muted, or a very dark brown or a very dark red, and then the white is an off-white, it's a cream. And what that allows me to do is to sort of mix these colors in such a way that they blend, that nothing really jumps out unless you want it to. So that allows some of the work to sit in the background and other parts of the work to jump out. I'm working on the iPad, and I do pull my colors out and work them out as a palette, but they tend to be only, if you boiled it down and took away the blackish color and the whitish color I use, I'm only using 3 colors usually in any one piece.
Yeah, no, it's interesting also with a lot of your pieces that you said you did limited palette, but it's really interesting to see how it's adapted and changed with texture as well. Some of the textures really add a sense of depth and also a different sense of like difference in the color, even though it's the same color. Where do you source your textures from? Are they all by hand? I know a lot of them are very meticulous, like
sometimes, there's a few textures on that are like wool and woven textures that I'd sometimes use if the project needs it. But mainly, I would have my paper texture. That would be a stock paper texture that I would add to things. But most of the texture you see is painted on texture. So it's not an effect. It's I would apply the color and then paint the texture on itself. So there's usually several layers of texture going on there. So I think there's probably a layer of texture at the very end, but the most aggressive texture in there would be done with a brush.
Wow. Well, it looks so authentic. It looks so naturally made that I can be fooled to think that it's actually a real texture. So it's really impressive that these are digital brushes that kind of go on top of the product that you already have.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that's, digital illustration is really people are only coming to see digital illustration as a real thing, I think, these days. We were always, it wasn't oil painting, it wasn't watercolor, it wasn't, you weren't using a brush and you weren't using a canvas. And it was always seen as something inferior, I think.
I noticed that in school, and it was weird to me. It was very weird to me. Like, it was inferior. It was couldn't be taken as seriously. But I was like, it's so much more accessible and so much. I like it so much more. So going back, I don't know how long now, but there was a point where I was doing work for for children's books, and the children's books industry was the last one to adopt digital illustration. It was like when I think advertising adopted it first because it was really quick turnaround. Right.
They didn't have to deal with couriers anymore overnight. And then editorial as well started adopting digital illustration because it's a very quick turnaround on editorial. But children's books has always had longer lead time. And they were the last people, so some of the publishing houses just refused to look at your work if it was digital. So
Right.
it had to be, really painted and really scanned. So we've come a long way, it's just like.
Thank God.
Yeah, thank God. But I look at people's work now and I can't tell what's digital and what's real.
Right. It's definitely blurred way more than it used to be.
Yeah.
There's some of the comments from the chat. Tolulup says, "Oh, Steve Simpson is a brilliant illustrator." Kirsty says, "Love the drawings." Valerie says, "Beautiful work." Daria says, "Stunning." Smoking Bunny is my favorite. And so we also had a few questions that came in actually from the post on Instagram, asking to see if there were questions for you from the audience. And one of them is, who is a good teacher in your opinion? Do you have a specific teacher that you had growing up that you learned a lot from, or is there somebody kind of public that you think is a good one?
Yeah, I actually, when I was in college, I had a great teacher called Kim Peters, and he was a bit of a all-rounder. And I think one of the best things he did for our class was he used to bring his own projects in and allow us to work on them. Now, and that was, getting that real world experience while you were still at school, and allowing you to, make mistakes, I guess. It's like, and then work with tight deadlines and, get real client feedback. And I think any teachers that do that nowadays are, they're special, because it takes a lot more work to do that than just to run off the syllabus and just set projects. It's just like, it needs that real world feedback, I think.
Now, do you have a mistake that you've made in your career that you want other people not to make?
Yeah, actually, it's related, I think, as well. I was very eager, when I was young, both in school and when I was initially working in animation and comics. And so I think I was always asking people for advice, and I think what I did was, I took all the advice that I was ever given extremely seriously. To a point, I still find myself believing or following that advice these days, just tiny little things that crop up here and there. And I think I probably struggled a lot because of that, because I took the advice so seriously that I believed that was really the only way of doing things. And it was like, because, working in animation, I can remember having a creative director who told me that the worst thing to do in the world was to have tangents in your work. It was like, you can't, tangents, you can't have two lines touching each other if they belong on different objects.
Yeah, I remember hearing that all the time from school.
Yeah.
The smallest tangent, people would be like, invalidated. You're like,
yeah, exactly. And you go, oh, yeah, that makes sense. And so you follow that rule, you keep that rule, and it might just be a little thing in the back of your head that you've completely forgotten about. Mm-hmm. But then I've seen some amazing illustrators out there, and their work is completely based on tangents.
Right.
It's like, it is all about using tangents. And I think, the advice I would give is that be really careful about asking for advice, because that advice that you get from somebody really just applies to maybe them or just to a particular project they're working on. It doesn't necessarily apply to everything else for the rest of your life that you're working on. So that's always been my favorite piece of advice. And it's the only piece of advice you should follow.
That's fantastic. Your advice is to not take advice all the time.
Exactly.
So that's great. No, I think it's a really good piece of advice, honestly. Looking for advice, actually, Eugen says, Steve, what advice would you give to someone who wants to build a portfolio but has no idea what style of illustration they have yet?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest issues, I think, especially college students and graduates and people in their early career have, is finding a style. And I don't think I had a style until I was well into my 30s. And, I had too many influences is in the fact that I worked in animation, I worked in comics, and I had this technical background as well. And I think, my portfolio back then, which was a printed portfolio, thankfully, it's not on the web anymore, but it looked more like an agency. It looked like, a group of people had done it. It didn't look like an individual. And I really struggled with it. And do you know ICON, the illustration conference?
Yes.
Every 2 years in the States, yeah. And I thought, well, the only way for me to really figure this out was to go and actually talk to, other illustrators. And I don't know how, it must be 12 years ago now. But I went over to Pasadena, I think it was, and I just met other illustrators, and I just talked to them and tried to figure out and try to look at them and listen to them. And some guy stood up and he said, about building a style, and it was quite a long speech, but the end of it was do what you love or something like that. And
right. Be authentic.
I mean, you hear that a lot, and it does make sense. But I think what it really means is that what you have to do is find out what you love first. It's just like for me, it's about surrounding yourself with the things you like. It's what do you wear? Do you wear loud shirts? The colors you wear, the colors you have in your wardrobe? What's your bedspread like? What's the cushions like? I found this on the market the other day, and it's my palette. It's my color palette.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and it was like it's got exactly the same tones and the yellows and the whites.
It could fit into a mood board of your work, you wouldn't
exactly.
be able to, pick it out like a sore thumb.
Exactly, and it's about surrounding yourself with these things that you love, and those things should influence your work. So rather than it being, that guy's or that girl's my favorite illustrator, I'm going to copy what they do. It's about, I'm a big fan of the arts and crafts movement, I'm a big fan of 50s, 60s advertising, Americana, hand lettering and all these things. And, if you bring in all of these, plus all my experiences, so working in comics, working in animation, studying technical illustration, and then my cushion, my wardrobe, all the people I like, and you put them all in a bucket and you mix it all together, and you get my style. That's what it is, and I think that's, for me, that's the only advice I can give, is that you've got to go on this journey and put together all the things that make you, that you can see reflecting you together, and at some point out comes your style, because the easiest thing to do is the things that you love. So the things you enjoy doing, not to struggle and try to do something that doesn't make sense to you.
That's perfect. Couldn't say it better myself. I think that we have a lot of questions in the chat right now, but I know we only have a few minutes left, and I want to make sure that we cover some of the stuff that you're working on right now and things that are coming up for you. I know you said you have a store right now, right? Is that just at stevesimpson.com?
Yeah, stevesimpson.com is a link shop in there. So I'm selling prints.
And then I also know that you mentioned something about upcoming drop for an NFT, right? Yeah,
it's very exciting. It's so yeah, I have my first piece dropping on the 29th.
Mm-hmm. And where can people find that?
Okay, so I posted on Instagram, Steve Simpson, but it will be up on Museum, so museum without the m.org. So this, it's very exciting actually. I never thought that digital illustration would find a home. It's just to actually be recognized as, it's almost giving it a legitimacy. So. Mm-hmm. It's very exciting. I always think there's parallels between the sort of musical industry and the illustration industry, and maybe the illustration industry is always a bit behind, unlike rights and resale rights and things like that. And you can equate sort of digital music to sort of digital art, I think, that nowadays. So very, very excited to see that.
Yeah, it'll be really exciting to see how the world adapts over the next 5 years, especially with, to your point, kind of the idea of usage and the idea of credit and things going back. Is there anything specifically different that you're having when you're approaching this new platform and this new frontier of creation?
Yeah, I think it's I think you know the way NFTs are going is that, you know, it's going to be something that exists, and I think for a long time, you know, it's I think it's important to create new work for it, you know, to actually do, rather than just regurgitate, you know, these past 30 odd years, is it? I don't know, of digital illustration, to actually create work especially for this platform. And,
Yeah, especially
you know,
when you were saying digital work is like being taken more seriously now too. It's also kind of going hand in hand with that as well. Yeah.
And yeah, what I'm trying to do is I think they're calling it, is it digi-physical or something is the term, where it's going to be a limited edition. So there's going to be a limited number of NFTs of the same piece, but the buyers will get a physical product as well. So they will get a shipped frame
of the same piece, or of like something that represents it.
Of the same piece as well. So it exists both physically and digitally. So I think that's nice as well. I think it's a whole new world. So we're just starting to explore these things.
And one more time, when does that drop?
It's the 29th, and you can find more on museum.org.
Awesome. All right. Well, unfortunately, I mean, we have so many questions. I wish I could go through all of them, but our time slot is just about ending. Do you have any last words that you'd like to say? I'm not killing you, but any last moments, just like 30 seconds or so?
I don't know. I think anybody who gets to work as a creative for as long as I have, I mean, they're very lucky people. Yeah, I feel blessed to be in such an amazing industry. So yeah, thanks to guys like you and everybody else. I think somebody said to me years ago, everybody needs people to shout about them. You know, you need people out there who will shout about your work, and I've been blessed. So I thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining. It was wonderful having you. Thank you to everyone in the chat. Make sure you stick around. Coming up next. Oh, did we just get kicked? Oh, we might have just gotten kicked. Oh no, I did it too early. But okay, if anyone can still see this, thank you for watching, and take it easy.